Ukraine remains under siege with Russian missiles raining down across the country. Explosions have been reported in Kyiv, Lviv, Dnipro and Kharkiv, amongst other cities. The apparent Russian revenge strikes during rush hour have killed a number of civilians and destroyed infrastructure. Earlier, President Vladimir Putin described an explosion on the bridge to Crimea as a terrorist attack.
A day of pandemonium in Ukraine's capital, Kyiv. It's been hit by a series of explosions which have destroyed buildings, including some that are part of critical infrastructure. Other cities were also not spared. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky says people have died and others were wounded in blasts.
They want panic and chaos. They want to destroy our energy system. They are hopeless. The second target is people. Such a time, such goals were specially chosen to cause as much damage as possible. We are Ukrainians. We help each other. We believe in ourselves. We restore everything that is destroyed. There may be temporary power outages now, but there will never be an interruption in our confidence in victory.
Smoke is still billowing in the city of Zaporizhzhia, which left residents also petrified.
The first hit was far away, but we went to the shelter straight away. There were 3 of us there. Then there was a series of explosions. I didn't understand what was going on. I went to the space where there was a window and sat there.
Meanwhile, the Chinese foreign minister has called for de-escalation.
We have taken note of the relevant reports and we also hope that the situation can de-escalate soon.
The attacks took place after Russian President Vladimir Putin accused Ukraine of a terrorist attack on a bridge linking Russia and Crimea, sparking calls for retaliation from top officials in Moscow.
There's no doubt that this is an act of terrorism aimed at destroying Russia's critically important civilian infrastructure.
Russia seized Crimea from Ukraine in 2014, and the 19 kilometers long Kerch bridge linking it to Russia's transport network was opened with great fanfare 4 years later by President Putin, who drove a construction truck across it. Kyiv Kumalo, SABC News, Johannesburg.
Well, to share her thoughts, we're now joined by the Ukrainian Ambassador to South Africa, Liubov Abravitova. Thank you so much indeed for joining us and welcome to the program.
Good evening.
Every time that I've spoken to you, it's been an escalation of an already difficult time. Tell us how this has been playing out in Ukraine for your citizens.
Well, the citizens live in the stance of war not since 24th of February. It started when Russia invaded Ukraine in 2014 and annexed Crimea. The escalation was coming gradually to the point of 24th of February. And let me make it very clear, that is because the world was not unanimous in accusation or condemnation of Russia of its violation of international law. Today, when we really find Ukraine under the rain of missile attack, of this is not only the war of Russia against Ukraine, this is the world war and the war against terrorist state. Today, Russia proven this status of itself, and I'm sure that many countries after today will realize and acknowledge that Russia is the sponsor of terrorism in the world.
Mr. Putin said that an explosion on the bridge to Crimea was a terrorist attack.
Well, first and very important point, Crimea is Ukraine. According to the international law and officially recognized borders of Ukraine by all the countries of the world. Ukraine is fighting Russia back on its own territory. We never fighted Russia back on the territory of Russia. All the military actions are happening on our territory. And Crimean breach was used to supply military equipment and weapons to Crimea to kill our civilians. And that was, in my humble point of view, a very important strategic movement. And of course, I'm sure that our government and our military were anticipating the revanchism of Russia that we've seen today. But this is basically shows the weakness of Putin's regime, because these are the convulsions, the already very impulsive emotions that he is allowing to show not only to Ukrainians and Ukrainian army, but to the world. I would say that Russians already lost this war.
Talk to us a little bit about the escalation, this round in particular. Is this revenge because Ukraine had started to retake a number of territories? Is that how you interpret it?
Well, since the 1st of September, Ukraine was able to regain more than 8,000 square kilometers of its land. As of today, 1/5 territory is still under control of Russian Federation. And obviously, Ukrainians are very enthusiastic in bringing back every centimeter of our land, and it was very successful. Of course, with the help not only of our perfect and professional military people, but with the foreign support through the weapons, latest, precise, and modern weapons that Ukraine is receiving today in order to protect itself.
The Russians say that their attacks are precision and that they're aimed at military targets. What are you experiencing on the ground?
Well, one doesn't have to put counter-arguments to what Russia is saying, because it's very easy to unveil their lies and to see the truth. I think that their goals were not only not achieved through the attacks that they were launching today. Most of the missiles were hit in the air, and others that were able to hit our infrastructure or civilian objects are on the pictures of media. You see the kindergartens. Is that demilitarization or denazification that Russia is doing in the kindergarten? Or those 800 miners in the mine that are sitting today because they cannot go out, there is no electricity, they just stayed blocked under the ground. So is that that attack that Russia was planning? I think that their weapons, not only not precise, but their army is not professional enough to make the precise war happened.
Do you have any idea at this stage how many Ukrainian lives have been lost and people injured? Because this conflict has run quite a long course already.
No one can give you the precise estimation, because in those areas that are becoming deliberated by Ukrainian army, we are finding so many dead people, tortured people. There are a lot of evidence and proven facts that Russians were establishing the special torturing room for Ukrainians on that places. We will have the exact number only when we will be able to deliberate all the territory and to have investigation together with the foreign observers.
A number of mass graves have been discovered as well. Are you fearful there could be more?
Unfortunately, yes.
Belarus seems to have joined the party. Can you explain to our viewers why they've joined this conflict?
Belarus is under the regime of autocrat the same way as Russia is. And the dependence of Belarus on Russia is very heavy. There is not enough of choices that they have, but I believe that people always have a choice to stand against something that is not right, or to stand for the rights, for the democracies, for the values at the end of the day. Because this is what Ukrainians are fighting for today, for our joint values, for our freedoms.
President Zelensky recently spoke about a 5-point plan on how this conflict could be ended. I just wonder, is there some areas of compromise? Because a lot of it, I think, the Russian president might find difficult to just accede to.
For me, it's like when someone would ask you, what would you do in order to stop certain conflict? Which part of the body of your child would you give up? So are you offering us to give up the part of Ukraine? Or maybe you want us to abandon our dreams and aspirations about the way we want our children to live in the future? The compromise can be a sitting at the table of negotiations after the last soldier of Russia leaves the territory of Ukraine, when we have our sovereignty and territorial integrity protected and respected, and then we can sit and listen for the arguments of another side.
What does a post-war Ukraine look like? Would regions like Donetsk be part of Ukraine? Would Crimea be back part of Ukraine? Or, I mean, we've seen a referendum that the Russians say is quite conclusive about what should happen.
Well, this part of the world has very great experiences in plebiscites. And I think that it's absolutely clear that the referendum has to be very inclusive. How many people, Ukrainians, had to flee from those territories that today Russia claims to be annexed by them and to be theirs? How many Ukrainians originally lived there were killed by Russians? How many Russians were brought to those areas to live on our territory? How many businesses were ordered to come and establish themselves in these temporarily occupied territories? How can one even assume that these referendums can be legitimate? None country of the world, of democratic world, can ever accept this.
This level of destruction, this amount of missiles raining across your country, some might say that it's unsustainable, that you're going to have to find a way to negotiate or find a way out of this. Could that be coming soon, or how do you read the situation?
I read the situation that way, as probably coincides with the position of my president, that the world has to say enough is enough. We only can defeat this enemy of the world, with joint action. And joint action can be different, starting from the sanctions and isolations of Russia on international arena, and of course providing Ukraine with the protection. We need to close our sky. Long time ago, our government and president is calling for all the parties who can assist in closure of the sky that this would really minimize the losses on the ground, losses among civilian population. You just mentioned 12, it's already 14 confirmed deaths only today through this massive attack. The level of destruction is immense and it's continuing to grow. So we really have to think how to put Russia in the position when it cannot cause damage and cannot threat to the world. Because this blackmailing that is happening recently through the food security issue, you saw today in Addis Ababa, ministers were talking particularly about it. It's already a recognized fact that it affects. And this is the manipulation, this is the weapon, one of them, that Putin is using against Africa, by the way. And I think that the threatening through the nuclear weapons that also today Russia is using, this is something that the world is facing first time in our history, and that can be very dangerous.
Talking about Africa, and I just wonder what your message is to, there are a number of African states that are finding it difficult to pick a side, and that seems to be how some Western countries are saying that you must join us and join Ukraine, but a number of African countries are almost taking a neutral position, suggesting that it's better for peace to be talking to both sides and trying to find a solution for both sides. What are your thoughts about countries who are choosing to be neutral in this conflict?
I would read it differently, because what Russia is trying to make us think here in this part of the globe is that this is the Western game against Russia. And I don't want to repeat this narrative, because in the beginning of invasion, 140 plus countries condemned Russia. It was not only West, it was the majority of the countries of the world. And we see more and more countries are supporting Ukraine today. We are talking about our joint values. Let me repeat myself. That's what we ask African continent to stand for together. Because if we are violated or allowed to silently supervise how it's happening now in Ukraine, that can bring to African continent a lot of conflicts, a lot of insecurity.
Ambassador, we're going to have to leave it there, but thank you so much indeed for joining us. We wish that this conflict could end very, very soon so that lives can be saved. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.